Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Connect Virtual HR Leadership Summit hosted on Quartz Network. My name is Britt Erler, QN Executive Correspondent. Thank you for joining us. Today, we will be discussing successful leadership styles and strategies for ensuring a productive, engaging, and transparent workforce. Providing us with incredible insights today, please welcome our executive speaker, Jason Lioy, Chief People Officer with Dawn Foods. Welcome, Jason.
Thank you, Britt. I'm happy to be here.
It is a pleasure to have you here and thrilled to dive into this topic today. But before we do so, if you wouldn't mind giving our audience some context and talking a little bit about your current role with Dawn Foods.
Sure, I'd love to. As you mentioned earlier, I'm the Chief People Officer with Dawn Foods. I've been with Dawn for about 7 years, and I've been the Chief People Officer for the last 2. I started as a Director of HR for our operations group and progressed my way up through the ranks and assumed this role March of about 2 years ago. I have a pretty extensive history and background in manufacturing organizations, ranging from manufacturing locomotives to CPAP devices to now sweet baked goods. So this is by far the sweetest position I've had, and not to have a pun on it, but it is one of the best positions I've had. We're a sweet baked goods manufacturer. We're about 100 years old. Just celebrated our 100th anniversary last year, and we service customers all over the globe, and we've roughly 4,000 team members.
Wow. Fantastic. And I'm sure based on everything you've seen, based on all the different teams that you've worked with throughout your career, you know how important leadership is for the entire company as a whole and for the teams underneath you. How would you describe your overall leadership style and strategy? And is there anything that makes it different or unique from what we typically see in the workforce?
Yeah, I'd say that, my take on leadership and my leadership style, they both match. My style matches my perspective. I believe that leaders should be very direct, to the point, very transparent and very humble, and very honest with their workforces. And that's how I would describe myself as a leader. I'm very direct and to the point. And some of that's just how I was brought up. But a lot of it has its roots where I started. I started in a plant, working for a plant manager, and he was very direct and to the point with me on how what he expected of me in terms of leadership, and that's transcended every role I've had. So again, it's that style that you really don't have a lot of time to explain things in a plant or an operation. One, you maybe can't hear the person talking, but 2, you got to get production out. So people want you to be brief, be smart, and be gone. I mean, that's pretty much what's been expected of me my entire career, and that's what my style is adapted to.
It's really the idea of being straight to the point. You don't have time to sugarcoat it, no pun intended.
Yeah,
but that really is the idea. And I think, this sense of being transparent and open with your workforce has really become a major trend, especially last year and even into this year, as we started reaching into this virtual environment. And you're not in the office space where you see everything that's going on around you. So that's really such a key leadership strategy that I couldn't agree with you more. And based on what you've experienced in your career, what do you think makes a successful HR leader?
Yeah, I'd say, if I look to go back to that first boss that I had, the way he described what he was expecting of me, he stated very simply, he said, know the business, know the people, and never let them get surprised. Those were his 3 expectations of me. And if you break those things down, granted, those can apply to every leader in every part of the organization. But as it relates to an HR leader, the HR leader has got to be fluent in the P&L and fluent in how the business makes money, just as much as in all the different inputs as it relates to the people in the organization. So they have to have very strong business acumen, strong financial acumen, but also have the other side of the house too, where they understand the inputs as it relates to people, and the different elements that relate to people in the organization, because they go hand in hand. So a HR executive that can do that and balance both of those is going to be highly successful. And I've benefited from having some very savvy leaders and savvy managers in my career that have taught me that. In fact, just being able to manipulate a spreadsheet and manipulate data for somebody, even at an executive level, is incredibly important, because data tells you a story, numbers tell you a story, and then you're able to translate that with how it affects people. To me, that's one of the single most important concept or important factors for an HR executive to have in their toolkit to be able to be a success.
Right. You can't manage and really provide for a team as an HR leader unless you know how they're benefiting the organization as a whole. As you mentioned, are they hoping to make the company money? Are they growing, and are they being productive in the areas that make sense? And you can't know that unless you're, like you said, really in tune with the data that's being provided and what the company needs strategy wise. So I think that's a great plan to put forward. And now I want to talk a little bit about Dawn Foods specifically. I know you've shared that really you have this family-like culture where leaders are accessible to staff at all times. Can you share how you've made this possible, especially in this new virtual world we're experiencing due to COVID?
It really starts with our founding brothers. They, Ron, Miles, and Stephen, they developed this thing called the Circle of Excellence. And it's really a symbol that we use throughout our organization. And you'll see lots of circles throughout our organization. I mean, I'm wearing a Team Dawn pin, but the concept centers around people, products, and our customers. And people are at the top of our circle of excellence. And that's a concept that, while it sounds kind of hokey because it's a circle and people are at the top, it's really how we drive our philosophy of how we treat our people. I indicated before that a successful leader has to understand the numbers, has to understand the inputs and the outputs of the organization, but has to understand how the people fit in, and then how both they input and how the business outputs to people throughout the organization. So that in our history is what makes our company feel like a family company. We're not owned by banks. We're not owned by shareholders. We've got a family that has run us for the last 60 or so years. But we try to hold that feeling throughout our organization, that family feel. And even if we're 4,000 employees, the family takes a very hard stock into how they take an interest in everything that goes on throughout the world of Dawn, how it affects our team members. Now, this past year, as you indicated, was one of those times where it was on overdrive, in terms of how we treat and want to know about our people. But that is what ultimately makes us different than most companies, is that, we put the people at the top of our circle of excellence, but we also put people at the top of our mind of everything that we do.
And really this motto, this vision, so to speak, that you and your company have, it really starts with leadership and trickles down into the rest of the organization. And I want to talk about, at all levels across your company, the role that your employees play in really the overall company culture.
Yeah. So we believe that everybody touches and plays a role in our culture. To your previous question, not to deviate, not to go back, but it kind of goes hand in hand. But in this world, in this remote world, the way things have kind of come together between our people and our leadership has been actually, in my mind, in my opinion too, it's been fascinating to see. It's a case study in, actually, from my perspective, an improvement in our ability to connect with our people. Even though people might feel like remote has taken away that touch element to leadership by walking around and talking to people face to face, what it's done for me, and what it's done for our leadership team, is connected us with more people and has been able to see us in a more real form, and us to able to connect with our people throughout the world of Dawn and have them share experiences and share how they're connecting with their customers and their colleagues across the world of Dawn. It's been a very special year, even though it's been a very hard year. It's been a very special year to see how people have come together, and we've been able to see this culture that has been created over 100 years really come to the top and come to the top and really blossomed over the last year.
Yeah, if we're going to find a silver lining in it all, I really think so many companies feel the exact same way. Even though at first glance, this virtual environment seems to separate you from everyone else, it really has brought a lot of people together that wouldn't have in the first place. You're really bringing your work into your home. It's become a lot more personal. People are getting to know their employees and their leaders, on a more kind of friendship level almost, because you're seeing their kids, you're seeing their living room, maybe their dogs in the background.
Right.
So it's a much more transparent. There's a lot more humanity going on. And it really is a beautiful thing to see. And I hope that it's a trend really that continues into the future. Now, are you providing additional training, additional resources to your employees to help with this initiative?
Yes, where some of it's just learning on the job and mentoring, and connecting people with other people in the organization. And we had to do a lot of that last year just because of cost control. But we are providing resources and training as necessary for that. And then also, when I was going back to the digital evolution, especially on our commercial teams, on our sales teams, we are providing extensive amount of training in evolving in this commercial world. We're focusing a lot on our commercial teams because obviously when you launch an e-commerce platform, you go from analog to digital. That affects a lot of what they do. So a lot of it is helping them understand how they fit in and then how they can evolve and grow their business and help our customers grow their business with our digital platform. And then as far as our HR folks go, we are also sending them training, providing training as needed on the job, but helping them more or less helping them understand and mentor them on how to think more like a business partner that understands the numbers as opposed to just someone who's in HR that happens to be part of a team.
And what has the response been from the employees on this? I feel like pushing sometimes people into a new avenue, especially in the technology space, when employees have been maybe doing a process the same way for 20 plus years. What response have you gotten from your employees, and how have you really pushed them, to take advantage of this new initiative you're trying to put in place?
Yeah, so I think at the end of the day, it's been a relatively positive response. As with any change initiative, you always get pushback, especially when you're trying to change how people work. But again, to look at the silver lining of 2020, it actually forced it, because our sales force and our commercial teams could not go see people. They could not go meet their people face to face. So launching a digital e-commerce platform it was one of those initiatives that fit nicely with what 2020 brought us in terms of a challenge. So it helped accelerate that learning. But now what's key is continuing to evolve the e-commerce platform, as well as enhancing the WIFM, the what's in it for me proposition for our sales organization. And we're doing that through multiple avenues related to compensation and other things that way it helps propel and accelerate that learning.
Fantastic. And it's no secret that HR has changed drastically since last year. And really, I think personally got hit the hardest out of any of the industries across the board. It's been mentioned that the COVID-19 crisis for HR leaders was very similar to the 2008 financial crisis. Which is, when you sit and think about it, it really is, the difference that it's made for HR leaders day to day, how they run their teams, how they manage their people. It's completely different. So how, in your opinion, did the pandemic really shift your organization from an HR perspective?
So I love the example and I love the correlation. While the CFO shined during that 2008 financial crisis, HR, the CHRO was obviously right in there with the CFO, but it wasn't as obvious because it was mostly financial. Obviously, the crisis of 2020, the pandemic of 2020, while there's a lot of people elements to that, in terms of health and safety and well-being of your team members. There was a heavy component financially as well, because unless you were unless you were Amazon, Walmart, or a supermarket, you had some struggles last year. There obviously many companies and many organizations across the world struggled, but for me, there's always this notion of the CFO and the CHRO being the right and left hand of the CEO, and 2020 brought that forward, and it brought it forward for both roles, because the CFO, heavily involved in 2020 in terms of cash management and ensuring that the financial well-being of an organization. But the CHRO, the CPO, the people HR organization, that came to the forefront in a big way. And if you weren't at the table in 2020 as a CHRO or CPO, you need to go find another job, because honestly, the HR organization was one of the key levers to organizations either staying open or closing. If you think about plants and things that were running during the time of COVID, our HR organization, our people organization, stepped up in a huge way, and I could be more proud of them, because what they did is they basically tore away anything that they thought they knew about how to manage a crisis, because it was all new. And we created policies, we created practices, we created processes to stay open and to manage our team members, because we were open the entire time, and we evolved and adapted and overcame throughout 2020. And then ultimately, we kept the ship running along with our partners in operations, and they were looking to us to help them keep that boat going in the right direction. So for me, it's really elevated the role of the chief HR officer or chief people officer and the HR people organization in general, because of what we had to deal with to keep our operation moving throughout 2020. And quite frankly, one of the stronger partnerships I have, and I always have had, has been with my financial partner, and the CFO and the CHRO are probably coming out of 2020 as two of the strongest positions that you can have in your organization. You better make sure you got good talent in those roles.
It's really an inspiration what you and your company have managed to put together. And I think there's a lot of organizations out there that are trying to follow in those footsteps. They may be at the beginning stage, they may be right in the middle, to try to figure out how to move their business forward, make sure that they have the right people on board, as you mentioned, and really be there as an overall support system. To wrap up this conversation today, Jason, based on everything that you've seen, in your entire career, and even just the struggles that we saw from last year, what is some of your final advice for other HR leaders out there that are just trying to make it through this time?
So I'd say have a lot of patience. I think we are all struggling in one way or the other. We all have our demons that we deal with on a day-to-day basis through coming out of COVID. And for me, if there's one piece of advice, or if there's one thing I want to make sure that people walk away from 2020 with, is that your role as a leader, and if you want to be the top leader in the organization, your role as a leader is to do just that, is to lead. And how to lead doesn't mean that you've got to be stoic and unemotional. It means that you have to be emotional. It means you have to be humble. It means that you have to be open to what's affecting you, and be okay with sharing that from time to time, because that's the way you help other people. When they know that you're struggling, but you're leading them, they will look to you with a stronger bond. I will never forget, during the middle of 2020, we were trying to get people to utilize our employee assistance program more. And we were trying to understand, well, what is preventing people from utilizing some of these resources? What's preventing people from sharing their struggles? Well, I'll never forget, I was I was coming into the office, and that previous week, I had a down week. Some folks that I knew that got affected by COVID, and I was having a down week. And my CEO asked me, how am I doing? Because she saw me in the coffee room. We were socially distanced, of course, but she saw me in the coffee room and she said, how are you doing? Something seems off with you this week. And I shared what was going on. But that next week, we had a global town hall, and I asked her, can I share that story?
Right.
So that I can get people to know that it's okay not to be okay. Mm-hmm. And the feedback that we got after that, the feedback that I received was like, now I know it's okay to not be okay. I know I can share my struggles because you shared your story. So be humble. Don't be a machine, because we're not machines. We're people. And that's kind of my main mantra, and why my title is the Chief People Officer, not Chief HR Officer. Resources don't have dreams. People have dreams. So that's one thing that we strive to do, is make sure that people can achieve their dreams at dawn. And to do that, they got to know who they're connected to, and they need to know, what's inside here to be able to do that.
It really is a two-way street, and to lead your people, you have to be just as open and honest as you expect them to be. And I think that's the best advice you could give any leader, whether in HR, finance, manufacturing, it doesn't matter. You have to really lead and pave the way for what you expect of your entire team. So incredible advice, Jason. I think this is going to be extremely helpful for a lot of companies that are tuning in today. So thank you for being here. It's been an absolute pleasure. And thank you to the audience who has joined us. If you have any further questions for Jason, there will be a discussion forum underneath this presentation. Please be safe, be healthy, and enjoy the rest of the Connect HR Leadership Summit.